the function for a given x value. Then I'm asking you the limit as you approach a given x value. So there's some overlap of the idea. I'm giving you the x value, you're telling me the y value. Slightly different approach between function and limit. So on letter A, f of 0 is asking you if you wrote the coordinate 0, comma something, what point would you put in that spot? So if I find 0 on the x-axis, what y value corresponds to 0? So it kind of looks like there's two values, right? One is at a half and one is at +4. The filled in dot tells you the y value. So if there was a value here at a half, this wouldn't be a function, right? Because it would fail the vertical line test. So at 0, the corresponding y value is 4. So the answer is 4. F of 0 is 4. So could you try B and C the same way before I go over how to do them? See if you can find 2 on the x-axis. Tell me the corresponding y value. See if you can find -2 on the x-axis and find the corresponding y value. Finding the y value is a little bit different than just what the limit is. 2. What do you think the answer is? Is there a corresponding y value? So I could write 2, comma something. There isn't, right? So it's really like no solution. So I just want to compare. This is f of a number. You find the x value, you look at the graph and it tells you the y value. That's different than what we're going to do below. So a limit is still a y value, but it's what is the graph approaching. So when I do part D, what is the graph approaching as x approaches 2 from the right side? So here's 2, right? What is this graph approaching as I get closer to that value? It's approaching a half, right? Even though there's an open circle there, it's getting closer and closer and closer to a y value of 1/2. What is the graph approaching from the left side? Well, isn't this part of the graph also getting closer and closer and closer to a y value of 1/2? So if the limit is 1/2 from the right and the limit is 1/2 from the left, then the overall limit at that point is also 1/2. So even though we said f of 0 is 4, f of 2 is no solution, the limit actually exists. So even though there was no solution, there's no direct value for 2, comma whatever, it would have been 2, comma 1/2 if the point had been there. So there's a difference between the notation. So now let's look around 0. When x is approaching 0 from the right-hand side, now I'm looking at this part, right? Right-hand side, x is approaching 0. What is it climbing up towards? A y value of 4. So as x approaches 0, right, x value of 0, the graph is approaching +4 this time. And then the second question, what about as x is approaching 0, but from the left side of the graph? It's getting closer and closer and closer to 1/2 this time. Do those two things match? Is it approaching the same value from the right and from the left? No, it is not. So we call the limit does not exist. So the limit can only exist if it's approaching the same value from the right as it is from the left. And if you look up at the top, function notation 0 actually did have a partner, right? 0, 4 was actually a coordinate on this graph. So there's no saying whatever the function of that number is different than the limit at that number. And then what would you say the limit is, the overall limit at -2? So what's happening on this side of the graph? It's shooting up towards positive infinity. What's happening on this side of the limit? It's going towards negative infinity. Are those approaching the same value? Are they both approaching positive infinity? No. So this limit also would not exist. So if the graph's pointing in different directions, then the overall limit does not exist. So you're searching for y values, but the y values have to like sync up. So that's graphically I wanted to take a look at 183. I'm going to have you work on the guided practice on your own in a minute.